Gold makes a new all-time high in Australian dollars, plus Bitcoin has also surpassed 100,000 Australian dollars per Bitcoin, making a new all-time high in AUD as well. Let's take a look at the price of both and see what the next price targets may be. This is your weekly precious metals and crypto price analysis brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard. My name's Joe. Use the time codes below to go to your favorite asset straight away. We'll do gold first, then we'll go back to Bitcoin. We're also going to take a quick look at the gold to Bitcoin ratio as well. Now, of course, what we need to say is usually we do analyses in gold and crypto, etc., in US dollars because that is the world's reserve currency. But because we're in Australia, we're going to focus on Australian dollars today. But do note that, of course, the Australian dollar floats against, and all foreign currencies float against the US dollar. So it depends what that is doing at the moment as well. This is the AUD to USD ratio right there, currently at about 65 cents. So depends where you think Australia is going. Do we strengthen against the USD? Do we continue to weaken against the USD? So have to keep that in the back of your mind as well. But you can see here gold in US dollar terms very quickly, very close to near all-time highs, very, very quickly with the USD. What I'd like to see on the monthly time frame is a close above this line right here, that $2,080 level. I've been saying for a number of weeks, if we close above on the monthly time frame 2080, roughly this sort of resistance level here, if we close above that on the monthly time frame, then I'm 100%, then I just say we are in absolute bull market territory, and then we're just making new all-time highs from here, and we probably won't see lower prices. But I just need to wait till the end of March for that. But let's go to gold in AUD. We'll do silver next week. We'll leave silver for now because we've made new all-time highs in gold and Bitcoin in particular for this week and just overnight. So gold here in Australian dollars, you can see it at 3,250 Australian dollars. I should say we're using the tradingview.com website, and we are currently on the monthly time frame. Each candle right here is worth 1 month. So just like, and I'll go back to the US price for just a second, just like I do like and do use Fibonacci, and this is where I have my particular targets in for gold in USD for the next, coming months and years, potential resistance targets. They're based on Fibonacci levels, and I'm going to do the same for Australian dollars as well. So I'm going to take, and I have been taking, and I've been finding in my research that the level here from back here in the top here in July of 2020, so right here, and the low of March of 2021 has been somewhat predictive for the gold in Australian dollar price right here. So I'm going to pop that top and that bottom in right here. Now, previously, if you've seen my videos where I have mentioned gold in Australian dollars, you've seen these couple of targets. But let me just show you very quickly why I do think they are a good levels to keep an eye out for. So we'll pop into the weekly very quickly. I'll just show you how, in my opinion, not financial advice, not necessarily the opinion of Ainslie itself, why Fibonacci does seem quite predictive, even for gold in Australian dollars as well. So let's get this as tight as we can. So there is the high of 28.75 Australian dollars and the low of 21.90 Australian dollars roughly. And you can see since this high and this low, you can see how the Fibonacci levels have remained pretty predictive. Now maybe I'll go down onto the daily time frame. That'll give you a better indication. And you can see where there are clusters of resistance and clusters of support that hang around those Fibonacci levels. So to give you an example, after making the high there and the low here, you can see we came up to a cluster of resistance at the 0.382. That's at about 2,450 Australian dollars. Then we had support around about the 0.236 Fibonacci. Then we made a play for this Fibonacci level here at 2530, 2,530 Australian dollars. It was a failed move. Oftentimes from a failed move is a fast move in the opposite direction. Another play for this level, but no, it was again a failed move, a fast move to the downside. And what do you know? we found support at around about this level right here of that 23.50 level. Big move and sailed straight through this Fibonacci here. It looked like it was making a play for this one, but then we found support within this Fibonacci range here. You also see levels of support, levels of resistance. We made a play for the all-time high in Australian dollars. No, again, failed move, so a fast move in the opposite direction to find support at this Fibonacci level here, which was the 50% at 25.30. So we were just in that range roughly for a little bit, and then we broke down, came down to this Fibonacci level. So you can see very clearly as we move up and down, these Fibonacci levels do seem to be clusters of support and resistance. Again, not perfect, etc., but I do find them somewhat predictive, as I think you could possibly see that. Now, in more recent times as well, you can see that we broke up and made new all-time highs after breaking the 28.75 Australian dollar level, and then we came back to roughly test that area. Of course, that's coming back to the previous all-time high. A lot of the times when you break out of an all-time high and you peak somewhere, you do come back to test it at some point. So that was pretty inevitable, but you came back to test it right here. And then it was an attempt to break out. No, failed move, so a fast move to the downside, finding support again. So this is why I think potentially you may see a little resistance quite here. So one of a couple of things is going to happen. Now, of course, as I said, not financial advice. And it's just like the weather report. Sometimes it can be remarkably wrong. But I have this Fibonacci level here of 3,300 Australian dollars right here. Again, that's based on the 1.618 Fibonacci from this old high and this old low. So at 3,300, you could potentially see some resistance around this level right here. Now, the other reason why I may think you'll see resistance possibly around this 3,300 Australian dollar level is because if you look on the relative strength index down here, you can see we are already in extremely overbought territory on the daily time frame at least. So on the daily time frame, I think you will see, again, I'll give it a more than a 50% chance at this stage that you'll see resistance at 3,300 Australian dollars, again on the daily. So that could mean that we spike above on a daily and then come back for a few days and then on our way upwards. But at least on the daily, I think you will find a spike at around about that $3,300 level, again based on this Fibonacci and the fact we're already in extremely overbought on the daily relative strength index. So that's the daily, but let's take a look at the weekly. Now on the weekly, we're actually not in overbought territory. If you have a look down here, you can see that you go through, of course, with the relative strength index, you go through periods of going towards the oversold area, and you go through periods of extremely overbought and extremely oversold right down here as well. That tends to mark, not always, but it can mark some tops and bottoms. And so we are trending upwards at the moment on the relative strength index on the weekly time frame. So we do have room to move to go into extremely overbought on the weekly RSI. So that's why I think potentially you could, on the daily time frame, see that resistance point at 3,300, but potentially on the weekly time frame, you may not see a week or two where we have red weeks. So keep that in mind. While you might see a little daily spike up here and a bit of a resistance on the weekly candles, you may just see this sail straight through that 3,300 mark. I would expect, in my humble opinion, that eventually if we do break the 3,300 on the weekly time frame, I think we might actually come back to test that as a level of support. Again, not financial advice, all that stuff. So that is the first main level, 3,300 Australian dollars. And of course, again, that depends on what gold is doing in US dollars, and also depends on what the Australian dollar is doing against the US dollar as well. But as a general predictive tool, I do find Fibonacci to be good for even the Australian dollar gold price. So that's my first call, 3,300, possibly a level of daily resistance. Let's look at the bigger one. Of course, right here, I'll make mention, of course, this bigger trend line right here. Now, I'm not saying this is happening in the next month or two, but this is one that you want to keep an eye on. This long-term uptrend line, this yellow trend line right here, I think that will become an area of resistance depending on when it hits. So just keep that in mind. What you can do is you can pause this video. You can also go to tradingview.com and find the gold and Australian dollar index, and then you can also put that line in yourself just to keep an eye on it. So bear in mind, it depends on when it hits. If it hits it in the next year, or if it hits it by the end of this year, then you're talking, 4,300 roughly 4,350 Australian dollars. But if it takes a long time, if it takes until 2027, then you're talking up in the $5,000 range. But this will become an area of, I think, major resistance, because you can see that very clear uptrend line right there. But the next major Fibonacci level, you can see it right here, is at the 3,985. So 3,985 Australian dollars. I'd roughly call it the $4,000 level. So I'm actually going to pop in. I already have them drawn in from before. There's the 4,000, and I think that is the $3,300 level. So those are the two levels to keep an eye out for. I would even suggest that it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could even see 4,000 by the end of 2024 in Australian dollar terms. So I had these previous levels drawn in because I've spoken about these particular levels before. So 3,300, probably less likely, so I would say less than a 50% chance that we hit 4,000 Australian dollars by the end of this year. But whenever we do, which we will eventually, I think, certainly make new all-time highs and continue to make new all-time highs in gold in Australian dollars, that will be hit at some point. And I do think 4,000 will be a big level of resistance, as I said before, because of this Fibonacci here, and that's the 2.618. So those are my price targets moving higher for Australian dollars in the longer term. Once again, to reiterate, I think you might find on the daily time frame a little bit of resistance at the $3,300 level, but on the weekly time frame could potentially sail through, act as support, and then continue on its merry way. So that is gold in Australian dollars. I would suggest here, just on the low side of things, if we're looking about low points, I would suggest that the 2875 level, 2,875 Australian dollars, isn't going to be visited again, because we have already experienced the all-time high, then the breakout to make a new all-time high, and then the retest of the previous all-time high. That usually signifies that we're not coming back down to these areas. Again, of course, not taking into account a black swan event or something that very much strengthens the Australian dollar against the US dollar, for example. But I think that's out of the realm of possibility now. So if we were talking about a dip in gold in the next couple of weeks or even a couple of months in the Australian dollar terms, the support level I'd be looking at would be right about here. I think you can see that very easily. That's at the $3,000 psychological value right there. So I'll put that in as a potential support level right there. So let's keep 3,000 as support. I don't think below there. And let's keep with the 3,300 mini resistance and the big resistance, hopefully this year, but eventually at the 4,000 Australian dollar mark. And after that, the ultra resistance level of this uptrend line right there. So post a comment below. Where do you think gold is going in Australian dollars? Be very specific to Australian dollars in the next year or couple of years. Do you have higher points that you're looking at? Are you even looking at the magical psychological value of 5,000 Australian dollars? Do you think that could happen in the next couple of years? Post your comments below. Also tell me what you think the Australian dollar might do against the US dollar as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that is gold in Australian dollars. Now let's take a look at Bitcoin. Oh my goodness. Before we go to, here's Bitcoin in Australian dollars, 104,338 Australian dollars right now. I did say in the making of this video, we may even hit 69,000 new all-time high, but we're currently just below that. So let's take a quick look at that. We are possibly starting off the day red right here. So we haven't broken the all-time high just yet. I have a bit of a red candle day. Potentially this could be a fake out, so do bear that in mind. This is on the US dollar time frame, but just under 69k, around about 68,000 US dollars right now. But here is Bitcoin in Australian dollars, very clearly on a huge uptrend and has been for the last number of weeks and the last number of months, of course. We bottomed out here on the Australian dollar price here at around about 24,000 Australian dollars, and that was back in December of 2022, and since then it's just been a nice little step up, and just in the last couple of weeks we've seen a real huge move, of course, with the US dollar price, and it's moving in lockstep. So congratulations to all that have been in Bitcoin down here, or even Bitcoin for many, many years as well. New all-time high in Australian dollars. So let's take a look at potential price targets moving higher. I'm going to do a similar thing that I do again like I do for Bitcoin and like pretty much all the other assets that I keep track of. I'm going to use a key Fibonacci level. Now, with the Bitcoin price in US dollars, this is a very busy chart. This is in US dollars right here. I have been taking the Fibonacci level from a very old high back in 2013 and an old low back in 2014, 2015. And I'm still finding those levels to be somewhat predictive even today in 2024. But what I'm actually going to use, because we don't have the historical data for Bitcoin in Australian dollars going back to 2011, 2013, we only have it on this particular index. This is the Kraken exchange Australian dollar price that goes back to 2020. So I'm just going to take some Fibonacci from the more recent all-time high and the more recent all-time low. So let's take that at $95,000 and the $24,000 level. Now, until I can find a more historical chart for the Australian dollar price, I will keep these as my next targets for Bitcoin in Australian dollars. So you can see very clearly as well, and if you take a look right here, you can actually see in Australian dollars, and I'm actually just doing this for the very first time on the fly. I didn't prepare this earlier looking at the Fibonacci in Bitcoin in Australian dollars, but there's the high and there's the low, and you can even see on the Australian dollar chart how Fibonacci is somewhat predictive. This is the weekly time frame, and I'll show you the daily time frame. You can see that after we broke out of the low right here, we broke above this Fibonacci level of the 0.236, and then we came back to test it as support on the daily time frame a number of times. Support, and a bit of support right there. It was a big level of support here. It was a couple of spikes down, but it remained above. You can see it closed on the daily above there, and then we made a break for it. It was a failed move, and then finally back down. And then you can also see we made another break higher. We consolidated for a number of days, about a month, that looks like roughly, and then came back as support. A couple of spikes down and a couple of attempts to break down below it, but no, this was around the $40,000 price right there in Australian dollars. And since then, it had remained as support. Now, I'm showing you this to show you what I think is the power of Fibonacci. Again, even in alternate currencies, in foreign currencies, not just the USD, you can see we have a level of resistance. Then we broke through it, a level of resistance, a failed move to break to the higher one, and then look at that, bang on the money, a level of support. They're moving on our way up to that 94,000. So up to the near all-time high, moving up to the all-time high, where we are right now. We saw this cluster again around this Fibonacci level at about that 80,000 Australian dollar mark. You can see even in just the last few days, you can see that we had a move up to the nearly $100,000 mark, and then a cluster around that that's the previous all-time high. So now we're in new all-time high territory, 1,100. I get you. I'm used to saying 1,000, 100,000, 104,400 Australian dollars right now. So that's why, as I think, and hopefully you might agree to, that Fibonacci is still a predictive tool, even though we're taking it from the more recent high and this more recent low. So that's why I'm going to stick with it for the moment. If you have a better opinion, if you have a different opinion, post a comment below and let me know. So I'm going to stick with these two targets. I always like the 1.618 from a previous all-time high and a previous all-time low, and I like the 2.618. I like those two targets as the first potential resistance targets after breaking an all-time high. So they are currently at 140,000 Australian US dollars per Bitcoin right there, and the next one is at 210,000 Australian US dollars. I do find personally, and you can let me know if you disagree, I do find that the 1.618 becomes a level of resistance after breaking a big all-time high. It is a level of resistance, but it's never usually the final peak before a bear market once again. So I would suggest this would become more of a daily, possibly a weekly resistance point at 140,000 Australian US dollars per Bitcoin, but much more likely you see a final peak, more likely around the 2.618 and even the 4.236 levels. So I would say watch out there on the daily to weekly time frame for a resistance level at 140,000, and then start thinking about peaks at around about the 210 to maybe 325,000 Australian dollar range, but that's a big gap. So once you get to that sort of 200,000 to 210,000 Australian dollar range, start assessing how you feel as well. Are you starting to feel quite euphoric? Have you just gotten into Bitcoin after seeing it break a new all-time high? It's like, well, we've just broken all-time high, so we're definitely going to go higher, and you've just bought Bitcoin for the first time. What's your feelings? How are you feeling when you see the price? When you see your investment going up? If you're starting to feel really euphoric around the 200,000, 210,000 Australian dollar mark, particularly up around the 300,000 Australian dollar mark, if you're feeling, you're having this very euphoric feeling, take that into account, and you may want to consider, not financial advice, but consider taking some profits off the table when you start feeling that euphoric feeling. So that is my feeling on the Bitcoin price in Australian dollars. Watch that 140,000 and definitely watch that 200 to 210,000 Australian dollar level. Well, you also do need to take into account, here's the relative strength index on the weekly time frame. We're actually, interestingly, already in extremely oversold. Now, that doesn't mean that the price is going to tank from here. You can spend a long time in the extremely overbought territory and see prices climb and climb and climb before you see it start to tick over. And this is also on the weekly time frame. Let's take a look at it on the monthly. We are in overbought territory on the monthly time frame, but again, on the monthly, it can take months and months and months. It can take 6 to 9 months even for this to play out and then start to turn over. And even when it's starting to turn over, the price can actually still be going up in the fiat dollar terms. So even though we're up in here, don't panic just yet. We can spend a lot of time in the overbought territory, and higher prices can definitely come from here. So those are my targets for Bitcoin over the slightly longer term. Let's call it by the end of 2025 is what the normal 4-year cycle would be. So we'll say by the end of 2025 around these kind of levels. Watch out for that one, but then watch out for these two big ones right there. That is gold in Australian dollars and Bitcoin in Australian dollars. I also wanted to show you gold Bitcoin ratio as well. Now, as you know here with Ainslie has been in precious metals, well, for 50 years this year, and has also been in crypto for, it'll be about 6 or 7 years now, since 2017. I just want to show you very quickly the gold to Bitcoin ratio. Now, of course, this is just measuring the gold price against the Bitcoin price and which one is outperforming or underperforming the other. Now, we absolutely recommend holding both gold, silver, and some crypto as well. So it doesn't mean you need to be in one or the other. It's a very good idea to diversify. But when you see this, you may consider potentially holding a little bit more of one or the other, or you can just do a 50-50 split and just see where this ratio is going. Now, of course, this can still mean that both the price of gold and both the price of silver, both the price of gold and both the price of Bitcoin are soaring higher and higher and higher. It's just one is outperforming the other. So you can see at the moment, gold has been underperforming Bitcoin, but we're coming down to around about a very key support level right here. So do take that into account. Do we find a triple bottom right there, double bottom? Do we find a triple bottom and then a bounce off, or do we continue lower? Post a comment below, let me know what you think. That's on the monthly time frame. Let's have a look at the weekly, and this is the one I really wanted you to take a look at on the gold to Bitcoin ratio. So very quickly, as this is going down, gold is underperforming, and as this is going up, Bitcoin is outperforming. So let me start that again. As this is going down, gold is underperforming Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is outperforming gold. And as this is going up, gold is having its time to shine. It's outperforming Bitcoin. But currently it's underperforming Bitcoin on the ratio. But look at this on the weekly RSI, on the weekly relative strength index. We are already in, on the weekly time frame, extremely undervalued, meaning gold has moved into the extremely undervalued territory in relation to Bitcoin. Just like the fiat dollar prices, you've got the relative strength index, which measures oversold and overbought, but this measures underperforming and outperforming. So we're already in this extremely underperforming area right here. Now we can certainly spend a decent bit of time, a decent number of weeks in that underperforming territory. You can see here it can take a while. While getting into it, this is November of 2020 and then May of 2021. So a good number of months, several months in the underperforming area right here. But eventually it does tick back up, and gold will have its time in the sun against Bitcoin once again. Now, whether that's in the next couple of weeks or whether that's in the next few months remains to be seen, but do bear in mind, we're not up here. We're not in the massive territory where Bitcoin is going to outshine and outshine and outshine gold for, months and years to come. No, we're in this underperforming territory. Now, again, could be a number of months that you spend within it, but it will eventually take over, and gold will then eventually start to outperform Bitcoin once again. Now, whether that happens at the absolute Bitcoin top, and then we see gold start to outperform, or whether it's because gold is just going on a massive tear in relation to Bitcoin remains to be seen, or it could be a combination of the two. But you absolutely will, let me stress this very clearly, you will see gold start to outperform Bitcoin again, and you have this very key support level here. I'm certainly not saying we're going to bounce here. You could bounce below, spike below, but eventually we absolutely will turn up again, and gold will take its place in the sun against Bitcoin once again. But as we said, we have been in precious metals for 50 years, in crypto since 2017, and we do recommend diversifying within the two asset classes. So head over to ainsleyBullion.com.au to get all your bars and coins, etc. And head over to Ainslie Crypto as well to purchase the best crypto over the counter. You can also give us a call. And if you're interested in the best of both worlds, I'll get you to head over to goldsilverstandard.com, because this is bringing real physical gold and silver onto the blockchain. Okay, so it's real gold and silver on the blockchain, but backed by real physical metal right there, allocated, securely stored and verified, and created by Ainslie Bullion. So that might be a best of both worlds situation right there. So make sure you do check that out. That has been the gold and Bitcoin price in Australian dollars. Let's see what Bitcoin's doing right now. We're back over the $68,000 mark. This could be the day, this day of this recording, that we break new all-time highs into Bitcoin. Where do you think Bitcoin is going in US dollars as well in the next year or so, or next couple of years? Post a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for watching. Balance your wealth in an unbalanced world. Take care, and we'll see you next time.